Welcome to KC Dunaj. Vítajte v KC Dunaj. We will talk in English this evening. I hope this is no problem. We have no interpretation, but we do hope everyone in the audience, we have very educated audience here in KC Dunaj. We do believe you will get interactive with us. You will get interested, and you will understand what we will talk about. On behalf of Progresívne Slovensko, Progressive Slovakia, I'm very happy to welcome you to this discussion on new progressive political movements we have here in Central and Eastern Europe. And this is a topic of the day. We can say tomorrow there's going to be an idea conference of Progresívne Slovensko, maybe the beginning of the new political party. Me, myself, I'm quite excited to know if there is going to be a new political party soon in Slovakia, because when I think about the next election, I would have trouble to find a political party to vote for. So I'm quite looking forward for some new ideas and new candidates. And we have some distinguished guests on the lineup tonight. I have to announce some small slight changes in the program. Ryszard Petru from Poland, the leader of Nowoczesna, is kindly apologizing to all of you and all of us. He's got some medical issue tonight, urgently. But he should be there tomorrow at the conference. We do hope, and we keep our fingers crossed for him to get better and be able to travel tomorrow. But he couldn't be here. But maybe we will get to the topic of Poland somehow in our talk. And there is a small change. I will get to that later. To your left side, Angelika Mlinar from Austria is an Austrian politician of Slovenian origin, so to say, and she's member of European Parliament, which is quite an impressive political career in a short time. She is vice chairman of the NEOS party in Austria, which is quite a new political party compared to Austrian Social Democrats or the People's Party. As far as I know, just established 2012 by another gentleman, your boss, so to say, in the party. And quite successfully, it became an important player in the Austrian political field and also in the middle of the election term. So you are surely very busy. We are happy to have you here, Angelika. And on my from your left to right side, my left is my dear friend Zora Jaurova. Zora, it's unusual to talk to you in English. We know each other for quite a long time. Many of you probably know Zora as well. So I will keep it short. Zora comes from an artistic field, so to say. She studied theater and worked in the theater and cultural field for quite some time already, for her age. And she became, so to say, a household name during the Košice European Capital of Culture 2013 time, when she was sort of heading this project in the whole preparation and was then, I think I can say it like that, fired for some sort of a political reasons, not really cleared why this happened, but nevertheless she was the one who made this project possible some times ago. And as Pavel Paška says, this was a very successful project, thanks to Pavel Paška. And we know we can trust him when he says such a thing. So whatever happened in Košice, Zora was involved. Yes, whatever happens stays in Košice. And now Zora got involved in the very, very beginning of Progresívne Slovensko and is very much dealing with the creativity and the role of culture in the industry and in the society, and is also doing some film projects. I can tell it on the side. And I mentioned a slight change in the program, so we don't have the boss of the Hungarian monument movement, but we have the vice chairman. It's my pleasure to welcome here as well Tamás Soproni from Budapest, who is in his professional life a translator. He's got a small translating agency, as you will hear from his excellent English accent. He's very fluent in quite some languages, and he was one of the first members of, at that time, still a civic movement called Monument, which got together from a new generation, very young generation of Hungarians opposing the government, opposing Viktor Orbán, some say not government but regime of Orbán. It all started, he will tell us, with the Olympic Games campaign, but we will get to it later. So these are our three guests from Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary. And Angelika, please, if I may, I would like to start with you. Unfortunately, Slovaks don't really understand and know closely Austrian politics. Once in a while, something comes out in the newspapers, but it's surprisingly this distance to Vienna. It's not really that present in our newspapers or other media. So please tell us a little bit about NEOS as a political party, and maybe your story, how you got involved in a new, as a lawyer, in a political movement like this, which is liberal, which is pro-European.
Okay, dober večer, Bratislava. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this kind invitation. I just said before, I have been in Bratislava a few years ago, but it has been too long. So it's just 60 kilometers from Vienna, so there should be more exchange. And the fact that maybe the Slovak media do not follow so closely the developments also now during our election campaign. Maybe you follow more the German elections and they are more decisive for the debate here. Is also actually a reason that I criticize my government, because in fact I think there should be way more exchange of information and just exchange of political knowledge and debate. Since I'm convinced that Austria should be more or less the normal bridge between the so-called, could say, old or elder member states of the European Union and the newer ones. Having said this, since you asked me a question regarding our political movement and the situation in which we are in, very briefly, from my personal background, I'm a lawyer, I'm a human rights lawyer. And I worked during the EU enlargement process for the European Commission in Slovenia. I'm a member of the Slovene minority in the south of Austria, and actually it was rather a coincidence how I ended up in politics, which more or less started in 2010. NEOS Neues Österreich was founded by Matthias Streuz and his friends and colleagues. There were 40 of them in 2012. And I was actually the party leader of Liberales Forum, which was a party that was founded in the 90s and was for a brief period also in the national parliament, but it lost all the seats at the end of the 90s. And since then they tried again and again to get back into the parliament. And you know how it is, once everything is lost, you hand it over to a woman. And because it's completely against the odds that something will come out of it. And this is how it happened that I became party leader of a party which I didn't really ask for to become in 2009. And once you have this kind of baby, you have to do something with it. And what we did was, since we knew that national elections would come up in 2013, we were looking for partners. And something that happens now in your countries happened in Austria a few years before, that what was happening was that several parties just came out of the blue. Just for your information, Austria has registered 900 political parties. 900. So it's not difficult to actually set up a political party. You need more or less 5 or 6 people. But it's another thing to endure and to make something out of it. So my goal was, as a liberal, to come up with a partnership and somehow form something new. And I found this person with Matthias Streuz, and we had long negotiations, 8 months, in 2012 until 2013, beginning of 2013. We then went into a political cooperation for the elections, a platform, and we made it into the national parliament with around 5%. Now the situation is that Austria is a very traditional, very conservative country, economically very successful or very stable, however, very difficult to reform. And we have early elections. They will be happening on the 15th of October. And our party has now in the polls, I mean, we are polling around 7%, I would say. So we are stable. There are no huge, big, whatever surprises foreseen at the moment. But it will be quite a challenge, I mean, to reform the whole thing somehow. And just nota bene, we are the only really pro-European force. And this is something that is a new development. I mean, a few years ago, it was traditionally the right-wing party, the FPÖ, that was really anti-European. By now, you have the Social Democrats as well as the Christian Democrats with Sebastian Kurz, who claims to be a movement, but it's more or less a one-man show. And they all became anti-European, de facto. And they orient themselves, or at least Kurz does, really towards the east, but towards Orbán and the fence and so on. So it's quite worrying.
Angelika, I would just maybe right now add, you could maybe a bit more explain about the way how these big parties, these traditional parties, because one of the big topics of these new movements is actually the reaction opposing these traditional social democrats or so-called social democrats or the People's Party in Austria. Then you got like the FPÖ, the Free Party, which became a mainstream party, which always used to be a little bit on the, and now NEOS. What is really happening with the classic traditional ones? Because as you say, suddenly they are not pro-European anymore. The social democrats are not that social anymore. Why is this happening? As you say, the economy is stable.
I mean, a real explanation we all do not really have. I mean, this was something that also happened, maybe you still remember, in the year 2000, when actually we had a conservative right-wing government. Also at that time, there was no objective or external reason why this was necessary. I think people sometimes also just want to have a change. It's not necessarily a better change, but it's a change. Now, at the moment, what we are facing is it's even more complicated. That it's not just, I mean, the FPÖ was polling, I mean, the right-wing party was polling for a long time as number 1. Now they are number 3. Let's see if they will get in number 2, but they will not have the chancellor. The problem is that their ideas became mainstream. The problem is that the right-wing ideas were taken over by the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. And this is our real challenge. We as liberals, we are fighting for an open society. We are fighting for democracy, the rule of law, human rights, all the basic principles that hold our system together. And this is being challenged. This is what we are facing. We also have the problem that the Greens, they somehow imploded. They had 12% at the last elections. Now they split. We have now 2 Green parties, and it's not even sure if one of them will make it into the parliament. And now imagine you have 3 traditional parties, more or less all of them rather right-wing, protectionist, anti-European. And then you have NEOS, a small party with, I don't know, 7%, being the only normal opposition party. It's like a nightmare. And it's not explainable. I cannot give you an objective explanation why this is happening.
Thank you so much. Zora, you are at home, you are in your hometown, we have the Slovak audience mostly, I suppose, but still, we decided everybody at the very first round will try to explain the situation in his country, maybe to the guests as well, and the reason why you decided to join, maybe you will tell us if you are planning to join the Progresívne Slovensko movement.
Okay, so Progressive Slovakia is not a party yet. That's something which differs me and us from my colleagues here. But if you follow the news and if you follow what we are doing, you know that it's about to happen. and we already have everything ready to register the party at the moment. The main reason why this, first it was a think tank when it was founded by a couple of people. The main reason why it was founded was that several or a critical mass of people of my generation had the feeling that the Slovak politics is more and more empty of any ideas, and the day-to-day execution of political power is limited on either populistic proclamations or these like ad hoc solutions. They have no concept, no vision, and basically there is nobody who would actually see the future of the country and do something for that. As we announced today, we tried to, or we are still trying to actually put together a vision for the country which will give it a future and which will give it a positive image of the future. You probably see this book which was published today, and we will have the conference tomorrow where we will introduce the whole vision. Since this debate should be more about the relationship to Europe and to European Union, I remember, and most of us remember very well, the time when Slovakia was a sort of black hole of Central Europe. And I, of course, refer to the time of the Prime Minister Mečiar, when we've been suspended from the accession group to the EU and NATO. And it is quite paradoxical that 20 years later, on the first look, Slovakia seems to be the most stable of the V4 countries. It is the only post-communist country in Central Europe which adopted euro currency. And if it comes to the opinion polls, the people in the country express very positive mood towards Europe. They want to be in Europe. We are quite high in the polls. While the turnover in the EU election is the lowest of the whole Europe. And that shows that Slovakia and Slovak people, they want to be in Europe, but they don't want to really think about what that means, and probably they don't want to do a lot for Europe. And that mirrors in the two main narratives we would find in Slovak politics about Europe. The first one being the position of Slovak Prime Minister, who is now a big fan of the core of integration to Europe. And he would tell us that we have to be in the core because we have no other option. The other narrative is the one promoted by one of the opposition party leaders, Richard Sulik, who is your colleague in the European Parliament. And it is based on very heavy criticism of European leaders, very often not very concrete or accurate. And of course, the declaration that we must withdraw from the further integration of Europe because we can do better without it. And if you think about those two, on the first look, contradictory position to Europe, I think they both lack self-confidence, and they are similar in one aspect, and the similarity is that they talk about Europe as something out there, as something which is external to us, and it somehow interferes with our lives, positively or negatively, but without us having control over it. And this seems to me pretty immature position on both sides, because the one of the Prime Minister is a position of a child who has to keep with his father because he has no other option, there is no decision about it. This is my father. He protects me, so okay, I keep with him. The other one reminds me of a relationship between the adolescent and the parent. The adolescent saying, he would refuse everything the father does. He would criticize him all the time, and he is sure he can do everything better, but he's still not really sure how. And I think we have to, now there is a time to grow up for us and in our relationship to Europe, and to become adult, and maybe to finally get rid of the post-communist image of Central European countries, at least some of them, and to become an equal partner and to declare Europe as something which is us, which is not out there, it's us, but with all the responsibility for its future. And that is something which I think unites all these new movements in Central Europe at least, but also in other countries.
So Angelika already learned that being a liberal in Austria is something completely different than being a liberal in Slovakia. How that is possible, we will maybe learn. Zora, but still I would like you to add one more thing. You had a successful career in the cultural field and doing all sorts of positions, and your salary was in a period of time a topic of public discussion and many other things, and you had quite a successful career in other fields, but still you decided, is it a generational thing, or do you feel like now I achieved something and I'm at the point where I feel like I have to give back some, or I feel like I want to do something more or something else, or what's the motivation in your case to probably join a political party?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because on the first look of this panel, you could somehow feel that there is something generational about it. And it's not only in Slovakia, it's also maybe in other countries. But for me, I think this generational issue in these movements is connected with, maybe I think it connects two generations. One is my generation, who sort of remember the time before '89, but the change caught us at the threshold of adulthood, so we remember what was before, but we couldn't be broken by the previous regime. And the other generation is generation of people under 30 who grew up in the transition period. And maybe at the moment, both generations might be a little bit late after, working on their professional careers, and the younger, which needs its revolution maybe, and they already want a different world than they see around them. They come together and they just feel that the politics or the execution of representative democracy in this country is not what they expect. And for me personally, that's, I think it's a natural step in my life, because I studied arts. And when I finished the Arts Academy, it was '98. And that was the worst time, I think, in Slovak modern history to become a professional artist, because basically there was no chance to really do what you want. The society was totally, chaotic. The old systems did not work. The new were not there. We've been just ahead of very, very difficult economic reforms. So for me, the journey to cultural policies and to European politics was something I was just trying to fix my field. And I was working on this for many years, and probably I achieved some things, and there are some things that are now better in Slovakia, and I took part in them. And I think it's a similar story to many other people in progressive Slovakia who've been also successful in their professions, and they are very various. We have lawyers, we have entrepreneurs, we have people working in human rights, and now they feel that, okay, so let's put it on another level and let's work on the country.
Ďakujem ti, thank you very much. Tamáš Soproni, before I ask you the first question, I have to tell you the reason why Monument movement started in... Momentum, I'm sorry. Monument, you're going to be later, maybe. You have still some time. Of course, Momentum movement started was very typical for I think, every authoritarian politician in Central and Eastern Europe at one point in his career dreams about Olympic Games. We had the same story in the 90s more times. Vladimír Mečiar dreamed about Olympics in High Tatras, Robert Fico as well. It somehow belongs to this agenda when you get it. Now you are authoritarian, now you have to do some Olympic Games. And the same thing happened to Viktor Orbán, as of course. After you built a football stadium in every Hungarian village and 3 times bigger than the amount of population in that village, after you finish every other sports, you have to get to the Olympics. At that moment, your movement somehow got involved because people of your generation suddenly said, stop, this is too much. So maybe you could tell us how you, as a linguist, as someone who wrote his thesis on Australian immigration policy, and who was involved in linguistics, how you got into a political life of our neighboring dear Hungary.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us as well. Well, I've just been to Felcsút, actually, which is the village of Viktor Orbán's, and I'm not sure if you have seen pictures of that village. It's probably the fastest growing economically village in the whole EU. I've just been there, and football is not only close to Orbán Viktor's heart, but also his house. I mean, the stadium, there is, I think, 15 meters between the stadium and his house. So it's really important for him. And when we crushed his Olympic dreams, at least it wasn't us, it was the people of Budapest, but we were also named Dream Killers, which is a nice name for a band or a super team, but we are not that evil. Yeah, well, first when I met Momentum, it was back in 2015, in a very small village, Velence, in a camp for students left to rot since the socialism, and there were like 50 or 60 of us talking there, drinking beer and wine and talking about politics. But there was, I think, one very different thing in that camp that differed from an average general university camp or getting together. And I think there was that we were there planning to form a party. So even at the first steps, we were quite sure that we will establish a party, a political party. And the reason for that, I think, was there were 2 reasons. One of them being that many of us had worked for aid groups, in civil movements and so on. I worked with homeless people. There were many of us who had worked with poor kids and so on. But what we had realized was that Hungary needs a systematic change. And you can't do that if you don't get into politics. So that was one reason for forming a party, for meeting up to do that. And the other one was that, well, we had quite a few political parties in Hungary, of course. We have a few hundred as well. One named, we even have a party named Two-Tailed Dogs Party. So, but they're actually serious guys there. More serious than Fidesz, I think. But we had quite a few back there. We had the right side, I think, the right wing, Fidesz and Jobbik, which were corrupt and evil. and we had the left and liberals, which were corrupt and losers. So back there, we could decide whom to choose, and it wasn't very easy. So instead of that, we decided we would form our own group, and it was a very generational idea, of course, because there were like everyone there basically were either still studying at the uni or had just graduated, and only a few of us actually worked back there. I am actually still now the doyen, the senior member of the board, and I'm 31. But we have in the party right now, in which we have 1,400 people right now. The oldest member of our party is 83, so we have stepped out from that generational idea. Also because I think what we stepped into instead of that is the idea that, as I think it has already been said here, that we need change. But change, we believe, does not have to be based on ideologies, because we think that we need solutions, and those solutions could be either sometimes conservative, sometimes liberal, and sometimes leftist, and it depends on the issue what solution should be used. For example, what I always say is that in general, I would be inherently against positive discrimination. It's such a weird thing for me. It just doesn't seem to be right. But I think for every politician, if he decides to change something for the better, one thing should matter: does the tool, does the means of change work? And if positive discrimination, as it has been actually proven in the US, it works in helping minorities, for example, then I think for the greater good, the only goal of the politician, the only means of the politician could be what actually works. So that was one of our bases. I don't know if you want me to talk about the situation of Hungary. I think I have an idea that you might know it better than other countries' situation. I can tell you a lot about Viktor Orbán, of course, and that's a very we have some nice stories, of course. But even tomorrow, we the government will launch in the near future, at least, national consultation on George Soros. I guess you have got to know the billboard campaign in Hungary that happened in last summer. But we will start a referendum against corruption, what is present throughout the government. So we will fight with Viktor Orbán in this case as well.
That's also the reason why the chairman of the movement could not be here tonight, because the referendum will be announced tomorrow, as far as I know. But still, maybe we could go back to the roots, to the way how your movement actually started, because it was a really bottom-up thing, and from that later you established a political party, which is something very different. But this case of Olympic Games, which were planned by Viktor Orbán for Budapest, surprisingly were opposed by hundreds of thousands of people. Actually, you collected lots of signatures, and the petition was really successful. Why do you think suddenly this change was possible? Because it seems from the outside and the way our media report on it, that really Viktor Orbán was able to establish a very, very strong regime. It's still like, it seems like democratic, but it has lots of features of an autocracy. And and you also mentioned this that every Hungarian really gets a personal letter from Viktor Orbán. You call it national consultation, which is a kind of nice term for this way of communication, but you could say also it's a very, very clear propaganda in many ways, and it's used as propaganda tool. And your movement was also opposed heavily by the government from the very beginning, that you are paid by your secret sponsors and so on. So if you could a little bit tell us the background, like how your members, how the people reacted to all this, which was spreading around your movement.
Yeah. Before that, I would just like to add one thing about the national consultation. You said it's propaganda, just so that you basically understand what's in these letters. It's usually because we have had I think 4 national consultations in the last few years. it's basically like with 15, 20 questions about the given issue. And I could describe the questions like what we'll have in the future probably about Soros is something like what does George Soros remind you? And then there would be questions like the devil, Lucifer, Satan, or the Antichrist. So basically these are the possible answers. So that's why usually like a few 100,000, maybe 1 million people send these letters back to the government, all Fidesz voters only. So it's not real national consultation, though I think the idea is nice. Would be nice if it's executed better in a way. Now, as for the Olympics movement, we started. We handed the question in to the authorities back in December. I remember back then everybody said, including everybody said that there is no way that you could collect 138,000 people signatures from the 380,000 voters of Budapest, because you need 10%, so it's quite a lot. And everybody said, advisors and so on, that okay, you could collect like a few 10,000s, like 20, 30, 50 at the most, and you should be satisfied with that as well. And we were also surprised, actually. We were surprised by the media hype. I think the media loves us, also because of our age, I think. So that was one factor. But also that everybody thought that they could kind of slap Viktor Orbán in the face, finally. I mean, everybody knew that he had been dreaming of this, hosting the Olympics and sports, and everybody hates the stadiums. I mean, I'm an avid fan of football, really. I'm a Ferencváros fan, and even I hated the idea that we got, I as a supporter, we got a stadium for billions of forints. From the government, instead of doing something, the right thing with that money. So really everybody hated the stadiums, everybody hates the idea of supporting sports instead of the things that really matter. So the turnout turned to be quite good. I mean, on the first day we collected 10,000 signatures, which was a clear sign for the government that we should be taken seriously. And that is when the propaganda started to work. The clogs of the propaganda wheel started to move, and all kinds of articles appeared about us, like the leader of our movement, András Fekete, he had a French girlfriend at the time, and so it was said that probably she's a French spy, and basically we are paid by the French government because Paris also bid it to host the Olympics. We were accused of all kinds of things. So I think, but the success of this referendum mainly, I think, lied in the fact that we were fresh faces in politics, and people wanted to say no to the government finally.
Thank you so much, Angelika. Just I think 2 weeks ago, our Prime Minister Robert Fico, surprisingly in Salzburg, met with Emmanuel Macron and with your Prime Minister Kern, and suddenly he was not the close friend of Viktor Orbán, but he somehow was trying to claim that Slovakia is different than Poland and more responsible than Hungary, and that Slovakia, as Zora mentioned, that we somehow naturally belong to the core, the so-called core of Europe. It's not clearly described what it really should be or is, but he says, well, we have no other option. We should be there, and you can count on us. And some say the so-called the European year of Robert Fico. He always got some topic for that year, and it's a social year or a sporty year or some other year. But this time it should be his European year. But nevertheless, I'm very interested in how you, from Austrian perspective, as a member of the European Parliament, how you see the future of some, because we have here some sort of small recreation of the monarchy. Not that I am dreaming of it, but we just see that there is some sort of that probably Progresívne Slovensko is trying to start some new cooperation in this region, which would be maybe different than, or the right Visegrad 4 or something else. Or Slavkov, or Austerlitz, as you call it. So what's your opinion on the way how maybe Slovakia or Hungary or Austria, how can we cooperate when we see we have huge problems with our autocrats like Kaczyński or Orbán. We have huge problems with people like Zeman who are boycotting Western European values, but we still do believe the cooperation is important and possible. What would you do? What is your opinion?
I mean, I was just listening to what Zora and Tomasz just said. I think your analysis is very correct. I mean, also, Zora, what you said, I mean, what is somehow maybe also a typical development of a democratic history. You know, I think it's the whole thing is relatively normal. Austria has been democratic for quite a while, and we are facing challenges from time to time, and nothing is engraved in stone. So what you are seeing here, or what we are going through, is maybe something that we would have had to expect. But in any case, it's surprising. Coming to your question, I mean, what would be my answer? I think it's a natural thing to do. We have to cooperate if we share the same ideas, the same values. If we share the idea that an open society is the society we want to live in, then we have to understand that we will have to fight for it. It is not given for granted. And this is true for all of us. And it's true for the Western European countries as well as for the Eastern European countries, for whomever. It is the thing that is on stake. And when, Tomasz, you said you have stories about Viktor Orbán to tell, I can tell you one thing. Last time he was in the European Parliament, was a few months ago, he gave a speech there was a debate in Brussels. I woke up next day and I tell you, I really had bad dreams because I said, okay, this is a challenging situation. I mean, the self-confidence he actually showed us when he said, what do you want from us? I mean, what do you want from Hungary? Why do you threaten us with structural funds that you are not paying anymore? Actually, you are the countries that profit from it. Come on, we all profit from the situation we are in, hopefully. I mean, we have to come back to the idea that international law, that the idea of the European Union as such is only working because we all profit from it. Sometimes one group more than the other, but however, we have to see that this is the idea behind. So when you ask me what kind of cooperation, what can I can offer you my leverage that I'm having as a member of European Parliament. I can offer you doors opening, and I'm more than willing to support the idea because this is what we have to do. We have to fight for democracy, the rule of law, and human rights.
Angelika, as a member of European Parliament, you have to listen to people like this, as you just mentioned. From your experience, how is the Austrian public changing its opinion on European Union? Because Austria was somehow helping lots of countries in Visegrad, but you mentioned that you feel like that could be more done, and Austria could be some sort of a bridge. Is it still somehow as a possibility for your foreign policy, or because your your Minister of Foreign Affairs is not really a friend of this movement? Are you trying to oppose this?
Well, I mean, he's a friend of Viktor Orbán, so you know it's all relative, huh? Who are friends and who are allies. I briefly have to come back to the core of also my motivation why I'm in politics. You know, what you described about the Olympic Games and all the stadiums, you know, I was laughing because Erdogan the other day said, please don't build any monuments for me anymore. So, I mean, you have the same situation also in Turkey, and we are all critical about Turkey and the developments there. However, we have the same problem within our own family. So, you know, the Europe-Turkey deal is actually in danger. And what is the plan B? We will get rid of the Geneva Convention for Refugees. I mean, we have to be very careful of what we are doing. There are a lot of things really on stake. I mean, these are achievements as a reaction for what happened in the Second World War. we all think we are so safe and this can never happen again. It's not true. I mean, things can move quite quickly into the wrong direction. Even if, I'm saying the Austrian government or whoever will be the chancellor, whoever will be the Minister for Foreign Affairs, most probably it will be not me, but however, this time. It doesn't matter. I mean, we have to do our work. I will not rely on who will become minister or who will then do whatever alliances they want to have. It's up to us. It's also this new generation of people who actually want to stay within a system where they see that they have a future and where they don't want to take a risk. I mean, what is the alternative? And it's not just, I'm not, the world will not stop turning. We saw this happening after Brexit. I mean, the sun rose the next day and the world is still spinning around. However, we also saw what is at stake. And nobody knows what will happen on the 30th of March 2019. It doesn't look good. I mean, there's a lot at stake. So no matter who will be in charge, in the government, I mean, we have to do our job, and I'm more than willing to do this. And I think we have a few people. We don't need many. You just need people who are devoted and whom you can rely on, and then you can move a lot.
Thank you so much. Zora, you are clearly a European. You traveled around Europe a lot and you work with international cooperation during your career. And tell us maybe from your point, as someone who was working with the European institutions quite intensively, the bureaucracy behind the doors as well. You know it from the both sides. The Slovak institutions like ministeriums and ministry offices and so on. How important for Progresívne Slovensko from the very beginning was this sort of international cooperation? Like, was it natural to look for allies around, or how it all actually got together? Because tomorrow it's going to be quite a big day. You have some international guests coming, some speakers. Maybe tell us a little bit about this. It's not usual in the Slovak politics. As we know, we are not that internationally connected as we could be. We see some fundamental differences between the liberals in the West and liberals or so-called liberals here. So what was your approach to look for partners around the region and further away?
I think the idea of being pro-European was at the very basis of why Progresívne Slovensko was founded. And it was one of the main pillars of everything we did since the very beginning, because as Angelika very, very rightly put it, I think a lot is in stake at the moment, not only in our countries, but in Europe itself. And maybe it's a situation we never faced in our lives before. The other thing is that most of the people who either have been amongst the founders of Progressive Slovakia or who are amongst the other sympathizants or allies are people with international experience and with European experience. They know very well that the European context is something we not only can influence and can work in, but we have to. Because if we don't, then it will take its course of events. So for us, this is just one of the most important things why we are doing it, and that's why we've been looking for the similar political forces, mainly in Central Europe, but also in other countries. That's why we feel the need to form this international coalition of similar-minded parties. And that's why maybe you already, you didn't said that tomorrow there will be a declaration signed by the chairmen of all four parties at the conference, and the main message of that declaration is we need to unite forces for more integrated and more democratic Europe. and there has to be a different voice of Central Europe heard on European level, not the voice of Viktor Orbán or of Kaczyński or even of Miloš Zeman and Robert Fico, but of people who are really willing to work for the European future. So I totally feel like European, and I will ever fight for European values. And maybe if we think about what can be the Central European contribution to the European story and European future, is maybe just this, that we at the moment can show that how fragile is the liberal democracy if you don't take care of it, how fragile are still the human rights we somehow took as granted, and how easy that can be lost forever, and the damage would be almost irreparable. And this is very shaking message, actually. And I think we need to formulate it very loud on European level.
Thank you. Ďakujeme ti. I'm looking forward to read the declaration tomorrow. It's going to be published tomorrow. Tamáš, maybe we mentioned some European values. We mentioned some advantages we have. One of them is freedom to travel around Europe as members of European Union. But what we didn't really expect at the very beginning of this whole process was that there will be such a huge emigration from our countries to the West. And this is something which is not troubling Austria that much. Austria is the country of immigration, but Slovakia and Hungary are clearly countries of massive emigration. In Hungary, it's even worse than in Slovakia. We have some 250,000 people who are who left or are commuting for work and for studying, not just because of poverty, but also elites, students and skilled workers and professionals. In Hungary, the numbers are different depending on which media you read. Government says it's not that much, but others say it could be up to 1 million or maybe 500,000 at least who left Hungary and are probably not planning to go back. Is the way why momentum is happening is that somehow you feel as a generation that you want to stay in your country, you feel it like your home, or even you want to attract people to get back and work in their home country?
Well, yeah, just to show the gravity of the situation is, I think that kind of every family has at least one member who has moved abroad. Also, we have, as I mentioned before, 100 local branches, and for example, one in the west is in Sopron, which is a city in Western Hungary. And there, in our local branch, there are around 15 people, and half of them actually live in Austria and work there, in Vienna mostly, and they just go back to Sopron, and in the weekends they spend it there. But that is one of the reasons why momentum is also one of the fundamental values or ideas that really tie us together is pro-Europeanism. Is that most of us, most of the founders, most of the first joiners, we had gone abroad. Many of us studied abroad. Many of us worked abroad. I worked in England, for example, as a kitchen assistant. So
we can hear that. We can hear it every minute.
Yeah. So that is what we want, is to get people back home. It's good. It's a good thing to go abroad and learn tolerance, for example, because when you meet people of different cultures, I think that's what grows in you as well. But fundamentally, we want young people. We want our intelligentsia, most of which gone abroad, to come back. And we talk about the EU as well. Of course, we see that there are internal problems, as I think you mentioned as well. But there is one more thing that makes the EU look much weaker than how weak it actually is propaganda. And the reason I'm mentioning it is that we have had some actions in Hungary to show the propaganda of the government and of foreign powers like Russia. For example, there was a billboard campaign in Hungary in April of the government. It said, "Let's stop Brussels." It was a clearly anti-EU campaign, and it basically, the main idea, the core idea of the campaign was that Brussels is weak, the EU is weak, and the bureaucrats in Brussels, they want to destroy basically the Christian Europe, of course. So what we did, for example, actually this correlates with the propaganda of Putin as well, who is a close friend of Mr. Orbán, of course. So what we did is we changed all the billboards, many of the billboards around the country, and instead, let's stop Brussels, it said, let's stop Orbán or let's stop Moscow, because we have had some experience with Moscow. I think most of you Slovakian friends, you also had like 30 years ago, and we don't want to get those times back. So.
Angelika, it was already said that Zora and Tamás mentioned it as well. It's because all four of us, we are city people, and we live in the capitals, or you live abroad, you live in Brussels now, we work there. How is the strategy of your party, NEOS, and your personal strategy to actually get people in Austria involved in what you do and inform them about your work? Because we see that, I think this is going to be crucial for Progresívne Slovensko, for momentum, and definitely for NEOS as well, to really get to the people, to get the message delivered. And so what strategies are you inventing and your colleagues to really get people know about what you do?
It's a very complex question, and we are, how should I say, we are successful up to a certain point. But let me react briefly to the dire picture that we were all somehow, of course, presenting here. Let me tell you one thing, that actually 2017, September, is a much better month and year than September 2016. Last year, when we just came out of the trenches of Brexit, that, quite frankly speaking, I didn't see coming. I was convinced that this could never happen. Also, the bookies didn't see it coming. So, afterwards, we had a candidate that was called Donald Trump that I didn't see coming. I thought this is not possible. The guy got even elected, which was even more bizarre. So it was really, really, really dark. And in Austria, we were in the middle of a presidential election campaign that was going on for almost a year. You all know the story, with being repeated and what have you. But in the end, we had a green president who was pro-European. Afterwards, we had Holland, the Netherlands, where Wilders did not win the elections. And afterwards, and this was the main and the decisive election, was France. So we all know that you can win elections by being pro-European. Germany is happening next weekend, next Sunday, and we know that by all whatever we can say today, it will be most probably Angela Merkel who will win the elections. Quite honestly speaking, 1 year ago, it was unthinkable that she would be candidate, because she had a clear stance regarding asylum seekers and migration in Europe. And this is quite a development, I would say. So, it's not as bad as it looked 1 year ago. And I would say maybe we could give Donald Trump the Karls Prize, because I think he united Europe again. And also Moscow's influence. I think it had its peak during the campaign of Brexit. I would say afterwards it somehow collapsed. Coming back to your question, it is a challenge. It is a real challenge for a small party not to have the means as big propaganda machines to get to the people. The boulevard in Austria, the yellow press, is not on our side. It is still possible to make cheap points by being present in the council meetings in Brussels and deciding unanimously on decisions, and then coming back to your own country and just stating the opposite. So this is still somehow working. This is what we have to break. We have to teach people that actually this is what's happening. So that people, ministers, whoever, sell things in a way that is improper. It's, frankly speaking, a lie. So I think, we all got very comfortable in our approach to how democracy works, and that you could rely on also the media and the press, which is not the case. So at the end of the day, what we are doing is we are going from house to house. We have this door-to-door approach. We have actually our campaign on the street. So people are convincing each and every voter, to vote for us. This is what we are doing. I don't think there's any way around. You can count up to a certain degree on social media, but we also saw what algorithms were doing. So rely on it or not, you can use it, but at the end of the day, it's the individual person that decides what's happening.
Thank you. Zora, this is going to be a difficult question. Maybe you're not the right one in the party to talk about it, but still, I would say I was watching what Progresívne Slovensko is doing. Last months were very intense. You were trying to get more and more volunteers involved, and people really bottom up somehow to... this is a new experience for you as well. What it actually means today to create a new political party in a country which has such a bad reputation of political parties, where we saw the cases of Rado Procházka, and we saw guys like Boris Kollár, and this sort of, when you look at the political map for the whole spectrum, it's just that easy to end up your career dramatically fast and totally, annihilate your existence in the eyes of the normal people forever. And still, it's a challenge accepted in the case of many, it seems like. I have a lot of respect for this, and I appreciate this. So tell us how it's gonna work. That you and what you see as a chance that you're gonna get elected in the next election.
I don't know yet how it will work, but. What we are trying to do is to accept the challenge of creating a movement, not a party, which is something which resonates, I think, also in what Momentum is doing or NEOS is doing. If you think about the political history of Slovakia, the majority of parties have been either created by other party splitting, or by some individuals who broke from their party and funded a new one, took some MPs and some, infrastructure or some members.
But also as marketing projects of some oligarchs.
Or as marketing projects, but I don't think they've been too successful.
One is leading this country.
Okay.
Governing it for 10 years.
But it also was created by somebody who broke from other party, who already had a political career, and then he founded his own party. So what we are trying to do is to really build it from bottom up. And I have to tell you that because I am naturally skeptical, if you told me half a year ago that we will be in this stage today, I would not believe you. And there is one very important thing behind it, and it's the quite a lot of volunteers we managed to somehow find in all the regions of Slovakia. Some of them are here, and I want to publicly thank them for all the work they did over the last few months, because I think they've been really spending a lot of time and energy, and I was every day amazed when I saw what they were able to do. for example, they managed to collect more than 10,000 signatures we need to register a party. And I think this is something, it's something nobody did before exactly in this way. And we are trying to do it the other way, the other political party do it. So, of course, it also needs a lot of, it needs more dedicated people, it needs more leaders, it needs ideas. That's why we produce the comprehensive vision of the country. But coming back to what you said, how you will convince the people, you may call me very naive, and I probably am, especially if it comes to the politics. But I still have the feeling that people react to, first, authenticity, and second, that they are just fed up with empty promises they've been listening to in this country over more than a decade. And that's why I believe if we will be able to show them the future of this country, in which is a place for every one of them, and we will be able to communicate that to critical mass of people. That's probably is the key to success, but at the same time, it's the most difficult thing.
Dear audience, before I ask my last question, Tamás, I would like you to encourage you to ask questions as well. So please think about what you want to ask our three distinguished guests, and you can do it. We have still some 15 minutes left, so let's get to it. Tamás, I would maybe add to what Zora was just saying. I have to tell you, you're a bit younger than I am, but me and my brother in the 80s, still in the real socialism, or as you can call it, communism, whatever. It was more like unreal socialism. When we were traveling to Hungary, it was for us like traveling to the West. We always loved to travel to Hungary, and we were absolutely amazed by the shops and full shops and the Western products and comics and graphic novels and music, LPs and so on. It was something which was not accessible for us here. Today, I loved with my family, we always traveled to Hungary, but today when I travel to Hungary, I feel like I'm coming back to socialism in many ways, and it's not a really successful story of the country, and Viktor Orbán is not really a successful leader. So why do you think he's that attractive? Is it just possible with all this, brainwashing and propaganda, with all the control of the media? Because I think the media are playing a major part in his success, as from my point of view. And how do you think it's possible to change the direction of this country? Because it seems like a huge challenge to make the change happen there.
Sorry. As for the first part of what you said, I could probably tell the same to Angelika. Back in the 90s, but the things didn't really change in this aspect. So when I go to Austria, it's like a dream for us in Hungary, poor people. But yeah, I think Hungary was kind of, after the goulash communism, the goulash socialism in Hungary. In the 90s, we were the Wunderkinder of the post-socialist countries, and we had a good chance to reach our dreams, to reach Austria, actually. I'm sorry to go back to that idea, but really for me, when I grew up, when I was being raised, the idea of Austria was like the West. So we want to reach that. And as you put it, yeah, we really went back to socialism instead. Now, I think there is a very strong propaganda machine, of course. I mean, just a few days ago, the best friend of Viktor Orbán in Hungary, he bought, I think, the 3 last local newspapers. So there are no independent local newspapers in Hungary, which is crazy. Well, now what we have is a few online sites. So the biggest online sites are, though, they are critical, independent, really. But what we have is street presence. So that's our only chance, I think. So when you said that you would go door to door, and that's the idea, I think. That's also a more movement-like idea. So we want to keep that. We go to even local pubs. A few days ago, for example, my friends at Momentum, they went to Barna, which is a village of a few thousand people, maybe not even that. And they had a local forum there. So before that, they just went to the local pub, which is a nicer word for what it was actually. And they just gathered together the local workers there, and they went to their forums, and it turned out to be great because they told us what their problems were in the country with Momentum, with the government, and so on. So it really turned out to be great. Actually, what we do is that most political parties, I think, when they go to hold a town hall meeting or so, there is a famous politician, countrywide known, and he goes there and tells the people what should be done with the country. And we don't do that. When we started our national road tour, we told about the momentum to the people, about what we think of the country and so on. But after that, after 50 minutes or 20 minutes, instead of that, we formed the groups around people of 5 to 10 at the most, and we gathered around tables and we talked about their local and national problems, and we put that to paper, and we try to form our policy suggestions as well, policy documents formed around these problems. And we got very good publicity, of course, from that as well, because finally a politician who asks the people what their problems are. And it was said to be, by the propaganda, that it was a psychological trick that we used. What I said was that we just asked people what their problems were. It's not a psychological trick. But yeah, so I think really going to the people, that's our only solution, because we have no money. We have no media. We have nothing. Just pure force of now 100 people and more activists, and we have to go down there really to the people.
Thank you. Please, nech sa páči. Môžete sa pokojne pýtať aj po slovensky. You can ask questions in Slovak or in English. Už máme prvú otázku, aj dokonca druhú. Nech sa páči. Môžete povedať. Môžete aj do mikrofónu. Máme takúto handku. Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Nech sa páči, pokojne sa pochválte svojou angličtinou, neváhajte.
Is it on now? Okay, cool. So, my name is Jan. I'd like to ask a pretty complex question, but I think it's very important. Because this whole discussion is about pro-European and how everybody wants to be closer, work more deeply together, and how we can all profit from this together. Angelika mentioned this. And if you think this pro-European thing to the end, if you go to the next, where do you end up from your individual perspectives? Because when I think about it, and I hear Guy Verhofstadt talk about the National Defense Union and a Coast Guard and a central bank regulating the financial markets and issuing European debt and these kind of things, to me, that sounds like pro-European at the end means like a super state. What does that mean to you?
I can answer you quite frankly. I mean, in 2014, in my European election campaign, I clearly stated we need a common European asylum and migration policy. We need a common European foreign and security policy. And I was also, at that time, as a member of a neutral country, defending the idea of a European defense union, which at that time I was pretty laughed at. But now there are also other people following this idea. So if I would answer your question frankly, first of all, there's never an end to any story. I mean, this is the This is the real answer. The political answer would be, I do think that a European republic would be the answer. But this is, of course, a vision I would be prepared to work towards with a European constitution and a real, actually, set of governing institutions that form more or less a common government.
Well, as I said before, the main values or the main thing Europe means for me is that it is, to me, the best guarantee for the liberal democracy and protection of human values in the region I live in. But if it comes to concrete policies, in connection, for example, to Slovak policy framework, I think that, for example, we will have to reconsider our economic model, which is based on the very cheap work and a few big foreign investments. If we want to integrate more with Europe, and we will have to take measures which will stop the social dumping, which now happens in Europe, and that will have its price in terms of economy. But at the same time, in the long run, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for Slovak citizens. It's a good thing for Europe. It's a good thing for the Eurozone. And it can bring a new quality to European policies.
Yeah, let me start from the idea of national interests. Hungary has 10 million people. If there is a global crisis, if there is a global issue, if we deal with the US, for example, or basically any other, with Russia, for example, then we have just no leverage at all. In the long run, I think for smaller countries like us, I think if we want to have a global leverage, if we want to have a global power, so to say, then we need a very strong Europe working together. And I believe that, yes, that could mean that we need to work together and we need to close the gap between our tax regulations. We certainly need a common army, for example, to defend the interests of the European Union outside the borders of the European Union. So the answer to your question, yes, I have a vision of a very strongly working together Europe. I would not name it. I don't want to call it a federation or something. What I'm sure is that there are huge powers globally, and we have a tendency to go towards globalism. We have Russia, we have China, we have India, we have the US, we have great superpowers. And I want Hungary and all our countries to form a superpower, and that is called, I think, the European Union in the future.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Ďakujeme za prvú otázku a máme už aj druhú. Nech sa páči, please.
Hi, my name is Fedor, and I have two questions for Angelika. Both, isn't your assessment of Sebastian Kurz as anti-EU too harsh, since he has been a wunderkind of Austrian policy? Maybe we need to know a little bit more. Can you please give a more detailed assessment of his political positions? This is the first question. Basically, is Sebastian Kurz really an anti-EU politician? The second is that you have been saying about Austria as a bridge between the old and the new member states, maybe, but also Austria was always the gate of Russian influence in Europe. We have a lot of debate on Russia and Russian influence here in the post-Soviet states. How is this Russian influence how does it perform practical consequences inside the Austrian politics? Can you feel it?
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. First of all, of course, it's always difficult if you ask me to give you a detailed account of my political opponent. this is a tricky thing. No, but just maybe, I mean, to justify my relatively strong or clear position, Sebastian Kurz is, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, also our European Minister. And in his last years, also as Minister for the topic of integration, I'm not aware of one single European initiative, not during the asylum situation or crisis and not during the migration situation or crisis. Not one single European initiative. His approach was we have to close down the Balkan route, which actually ended up in destabilizing the whole region. And his approach is now we have to close down the route in the Mediterranean, and the NGOs are the problem. So I'm terribly sorry, but I will not be changing my position. I mean, we are also attacking him in this context in Austria, and in fact, his reaction towards the decision taken by the European Court of Justice lately towards Poland and Slovakia was, well, we have to respect this decision. However, there is no European solution to be found in the area of asylum and migration. So I hope this answers your question in this respect. Regarding your second question and the Russian influence, I can only acknowledge it. You are right. This is also what we know, or what is our, I mean, the position, how should I say, the information that I have. We are also aware of the transfer and the support of Russian money towards the right-wing parties. We could never prove the concrete transfer towards the FPÖ, but towards Marine Le Pen it is more or less notorious because Russian banks were giving Le Pen actually loans. So there is a strong influence of Russia towards the Austrian politics as such. I mean, basically through two parties. That's on the one side the FPÖ, and the other actually through the Social Democrats, which is traditionally close. However, I mean, the sanctions towards Russia are regularly a topic also raised by the Austrians, who want to lift the sanctions. But so far, I mean, there is no majority within I mean, in the member states, so this will not happen soon.
Ďakujeme, thank you very much. We have time for one or two more questions, so we are a little bit running out of time.
Hello.
Please, hello.
Perfect. Hello, I'm Florian Niederse, and when I moved from Austria to Bratislava, I was mostly always seen as a lunatic. Because, well, as you already addressed it, Slovakia and Hungary are rather immigration countries, and as Austria, rather immigration countries. Now, I saw when I arrived here in Bratislava a lot potential, and I'm sure.
I'm sorry, you are the second Austrian immigrant in Slovakia that I know. Great, congratulations on that. Thank you so much, Florian. We appreciate that.
Merci.
Please, you can continue.
And I'm sure also Tamas and Zora see a lot of potential in their countries. My question now, mainly for you two, is how do you want to show the people in your country the potential, the real potential of what Slovaks and Hungarians can do, but also Austrians can do in the eastern neighbors?
It's an interesting question, actually. I have the feeling that there is one specific skill or ability which is maybe common to several ex-Soviet countries, and that's because we had to live through very difficult transitions over the last decades, and we had to maybe catch up with something which has been developed in Western Europe for a much longer time. And that's why we have a lot of really innovative ways of doing things. You mentioned at the beginning that Austria is a very established country, so it is very difficult to change things. We in this country have so many experiences with changes and transitions that we can actually grasp the very essence of the transition, and we can maybe offer solutions they wouldn't be possible in countries with established democracy. That's the first thing. The second one is what I already said, that we know something about the fragility of democracy, about how easily it can be lost. And the situation in Slovakia in 90s or in Hungary now, in Poland now, is only a proof of that. So, yeah, I think this is something we can really work on. And just very personal message to you. I was listening a couple of days ago to our Prime Minister, who was commenting on the decision of European Court of Justice, which didn't approve our appeal, or what is it, about the immigration quotas. And he said that, you know, but it's like nobody wants to stay in Slovakia, so should we keep them here? Which was very strange for me, because even the tone of this voice is the very reason why nobody wants to stay in Slovakia. So, yeah, so I think it's also about us, that we have to create a favorable and welcoming environment. So maybe after that, the immigrants would like to stay here and would contribute to the economy. We know very well that we have a lot of problems with the missing jobs, and we need people for the work market. So thank you for moving to Bratislava, and I hope that there will be more people like you who decide to stay here.
Yeah, firstly, I'm pretty envious of the previous question of Angelika, because I thought that we were gatekeepers of Russia in Europe now. I mean, we have a right-wing party, Jobbik, which was founded and funded by the Russian government most, and the Iranian government as well. So that's a mixture at least. And yeah, we are building now a nuclear power plant from Russia money and so on. Never mind. We have a Russian spy in the EP, actually, the European Parliament. I don't know, Béla Kovács, you must have heard his case. Anyway, yeah, as for the potential, if I understood it well, what the potential of Hungary lies within, if that was the question, I think when we think of visions, and I see that you are publishing your own vision of Slovakia, when we have published our vision of Hungary, it was about 5 topics, but the most important of which was, I think, education. And we always look for good ideas and good political moves from abroad as well. And when we think of a great potential, what comes to mind is always children of people, children of Hungary, for example. So what we need is a very strong educational system. This will get a very important section in our policy paper, which will be published on the 15th of October as well. The whole program. It will be a bit more than an average political program. I think our people do a much harder job. It's kind of governmental program, actually. And we will put an emphasis on education. And it is very much similar what Finland did back in the 50s or 60s. Actually, you must have read some articles at least, or even books. There is about the Finnish miracle. That should be the basis for, I think, most of our smaller countries, because we don't have oil. We have EU funds, but those are stolen by the politicians. That should be changed as well, of course. But mostly what we have is human capital, and that should be changed. That should be improved.
Well, I think this is a nice ending for our discussion. Thank you very much, Angelika, Mlinar, Zora Jaurova, and Tamáš Hoproni. And first of all, thank you very much, the audience, for showing up. Ďakujeme veľmi pekne, že ste prišli. We do appreciate. And please give our guests some nice applause. Please, poprosím vás o malý potles pre našich vzácnych hostí. A ďakujeme veľmi pekne. Danke sehr, köszönöm szépen, ďakujeme Zora.